what if I just figured something out about myself on your show?
I love it.
You're such a good host.
I'm taking this to my therapy this week. Today's guest is best known for her role as Dina in The Band's Visit. Please welcome to the Zoom, Jennifer Apple.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh my gosh, thank you for making the time. I really appreciate it.
Love it. Just two curly-haired women in a
Yeah.
space.
I usually start by talking about how we met, but we're meeting right now. So there's that. And I'm so excited to learn more about your story. Where are you from?
I'm a native New Yorker.
Wow.
Yeah, born and raised. I mean, I've left, but
Hmm.
I've kept coming back.
What part of New York?
Born in Manhattan, raised between Manhattan and Westchester, so suburbs and the city.
What did your parents do growing up?
My father is in real estate. My mother is a social worker.
Wow. So
Yeah.
how did the arts come into your life as a kid?
Oh man. I was singing since I started speaking, and I had a brother. I have a brother who's 2 years younger than me, and then I have two other siblings below. But when I was younger, I would like force him to do like little shows, and we performed
Mhm.
them around the house. And I clearly had the bug young.
Yeah.
My parents tried to put me in piano lessons, and that I hated practicing, but like also what kid likes to practice. But then they put me in voice lessons when I was 7, and that was like it stuck. Um, and then I was, that kid who with a really good voice in school, and I, started doing community theater, and then that led to theater camp, which led to, being that kid in high school, which led to college, which led to my MFA, which I mean, it's just like it was the
Yeah.
natural snowball. It wasn't anything cute. It wasn't like somebody was like, you have something on the street, and then the next thing you know, my
Yeah.
life is different. Nothing original in that way, but classic, fostering from a young age
Right.
moment.
So did you always know that this was going to be your path, or was there like a defining moment?
Um, I don't think I fully understood that it was something that you could do as a career until I went to theater camp, Long Lake Camp for the Arts, shout out. There were some kids of like famous people who went there. And I remember interacting with them and knowing that their parents, like that was their job. And there was a light bulb moment then of like, oh, this isn't just something that it can be a hobby. Like this is something that I could do as a career. And I don't think I fully understood that, what that even meant. And frankly, I don't even know if I still do. Like, I definitely had that switch of this isn't just something I love. It's something that I could do because these people do it and they seem to be doing it successfully.
And
So
did you know the path to get there? Or you just were like, I'm going to follow my passion and it's going to work out.
I don't know. I think I'm a pretty resilient person. I also am somebody who really likes to like understand things. I ask a lot of questions and I'm always seeking to learn more. And so I think as I understood that that was a possibility, I didn't really have like specific mentors. I wasn't in like a, you know, theater high school. I was the one kind of creating a path for myself in that kind of space. And I went to undergrad for a BA as opposed to BFA, so I didn't really have the somebody who was like, this is how you do it. I was one of the first students from my school to ever be pursuing the arts, and they in their like college guidance counselor, like they didn't have that either. So I don't think I ever really knew. I think I was scavenging and finding information and talking to people when I could, but was it super clear? Not specifically. I just think I trusted a little bit of like, you're going to figure it out clearly. And things became a little bit more crystallized as I put myself in different spaces and met different people who knew more than I did. And then I kind of understood a little bit more. But do we all does anybody have any answers? I mean, like, I think that's part of it. It's not a linear thing, And so
Yeah.
even however many years into my career that I am now, I still feel like I know nothing. I mean, I know more certainly, but it keeps shifting. And I think that's partially like what it means to be an artist, especially nowadays, is just to continuously remain flexible and open and curious.
Do you enjoy that part of the lifestyle and career?
Now that I'm older, I'm not going to age myself. But now that I'm older, I think there's a part of me that really does crave a bit more stability and really does crave a little bit more linearity. And it's not that I'm not good at being flexible. I'm actually quite good at it. And it's not that I am not adaptable. I am very adaptable. I just think there's a part of me that really wishes that things were not so unprecedented all the time and that there was a bit more of a standard path and things felt a little bit more secure generally in the industry. Forget even within myself. I think just we are in a really beautiful and overwhelming flux time across the industry, and it keeps shifting and changing, in some ways for the better, in some ways I think it remains to be seen. That all isn't exactly what I want. I think it's more like I think I understood that when I decided to do this, I in some way had the agency of when and how I wanted to remain more flexible or less. That, you know, if I wanted to go and do more regional theater, then that was on me to decide that, oh, I want to be here for 2 months, I want to be here for 2 months, and I want to be here for 2 months. And then there's sometimes you get to a point where you're like, no, I'd like to stay where I am, and I'd like to be doing these kinds of things. And if those things aren't yielding the results that you might want, then how do I pivot to make those things happen? It's a very different way of being flexible.
Do you have those mentors and guides now?
Yeah, I have more of them. Arguably, a lot of it is within myself at this point. I think I have a couple of mentors that I really do look towards and ask for guidance. My therapist isn't a mentor, but my therapist is a space, is somebody with whom I could really navigate a lot of what I'm feeling in a way that feels impactful and empowering. And then within myself and having more of a trust within my own gut, and also an awareness of what I know and what I don't know, and therefore where to look. And I also, you know, as a fellow podcast host, I host the Empowered Artists Collective podcast, and arguably what that is and why it came to be was over the summer, pandemic summer 2020. I had this light bulb moment as I was coaching a lot of these young artists. And that is another part of what I do. I'm an acting and singing coach. And all these young artists were, you know, like learning to do their monologues better and perform their songs more grounded and all of that. But everyone was struggling with all of like the life and business stuff. And I didn't claim necessarily to know the answers, but I knew that we weren't empowering our artists in that way, nor had I been when I started out. And so we started the Empowered Artists Collective as this incubator program for women and non-binary artists. It was like a 2.5, 3-month virtual incubator internationally. We ran 5 cohorts over a year and a half.
Wow.
Was to have panels and workshops and accountability partnerships and art shares, art and process. Thank you. And it was for exactly that, of like, no one's talking about mental health and wellness. No one's talking about finances. No one's talking about your imposter syndrome. No one's talking about you have, you know, a multi-hyphen itself. Like, how do you actually balance that?
Darn, I wish I was like aware of that.
Yeah, it was really wonderful and really impactful. And we had some unbelievable artists come through, and now they're still really good friends. And we brought in what we called trailblazers in the industry who knew more about these other topics than I did. We pivoted to the podcast 2 years ago. We have had 2 seasons, over 90 episodes. We like barely missed a week. It was wild. So there's 90 episodes worth of a Rolodex that ranges from those topics and beyond. Some are a little bit more tactile, of like, we talked to a casting director about self-tapes. We talked to a headshot photographer about headshots. We talked to a tax person about taxes for artists, or a lawyer for, like,
that's incredible.
Thank you. But I guess this is to answer your question of like, I don't necessarily, I have my mentors, I have myself, I have my therapist, and I now have a plethora of incredible individuals that I have cultivated relationships with through the incubator program. And then also more specifically with this podcast, as we're gearing up for season 3 also, that may not be, you know, the person I go to for all of the things, but I do now have a curated list of incredible people in this industry across all of these different facets, so that if and when I have a question, if and when somebody like yourself is like, what am I doing? And they reach out, I'm like, please talk to this person, you know? And so I say all that to say, like, yes, and.
Right. That's so incredible. What has the process of having this podcast taught you about yourself?
Oh man, it's taught me a lot. I think I navigated a bit of imposter syndrome for the first 2 seasons of it.
Mhm.
I knew that I was providing a resource. I believe and still believe deeply in what I have done and am continuing to do with it. Again, it stems from a place of like, I wish I had this.
Yeah.
And I also am a firm believer that I don't understand the gatekeeping part of this industry when we are claiming to be about collaboration and care and empathy and support, why there seem to be so many ways that we're not actually doing any of those things.
Mhm.
And in an effort to debunk that and to make it feel like there's a little bit more of a community, facilitating these conversations really aligns with my ethos and frankly, like my mission statement as an artist, and certainly as a coach.
Mhm.
You know, I really am like in pursuit of truth and vulnerability and empathy through art. And so I've been able to really live out my value system by having these conversations, and really feel like even in a small micro way, I am creating community and people
Yeah.
are expanding themselves through those conversations. But I would be lying if I didn't say it was like, who am I to do this? And I purposefully like kept it very much like this is the Empowered Artist Collective, and then there's me.
Mhm.
And as we're gearing up for season 3, I'm stepping more into myself in that and recognizing like I am the host of this thing. I have built this incredibly beautiful community and resource with the help of some unbelievable human beings. It's not just me in a vacuum. Um, and it's not about, who am I to do this? I can still feel those things, but it's also like, who am I not to own this incredible thing that I've, helped facilitate and create? I think as artists, so often we could try to keep ourselves really small and not take up the space that we deserve because we feel like somehow that takes away from other people. But like it doesn't. It's like you owning who you are and stepping into yourself in that way, give somebody else permission to do the same, and then somebody else permission to do the same, and then there we all are, fully embodied human beings taking up the space that we deserve because we're humans to take up. And then we're all creating from a place of truth and vulnerability and empathy, and it's all integrated. So I've learned a lot about myself and certainly how I can step further into something without feeling the imposter syndrome as loudly.
Mhm.
And certainly my ability to connect people and my desire for transparency and uncomfortable mess,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be this tight little beautiful bow of like, this is product and we're in consumerism and capitalism. It's like, yeah, and how we're messy. Like that's what we do. We tell things that are about the human condition, and it's not all pretty. And I get to be in conversation like that. It's really exciting.
I mean, I feel similarly in like starting behind the resume. And it's just beautiful, like hearing you talk about wanting to create that space
Thank you.
for people to share and to not gatekeep the information. Um, so are you mostly musical theater, or do you also like act in TV and film and other avenues?
Yeah, my background, the majority of my early career was musical theater, specifically regionally and in New York. And then I went back to get my MFA in acting. And that was with the intention and purpose of doing more on camera work and also more just like straight plays and theater that in Shakespeare that didn't require me to sing. I'm very lucky and privileged that, I now have my feet in all the little puddles. The goal for me ideally is to do more and more on camera work. I find it more challenging and exciting and bigger than myself in some way that feels impactful.
Yeah.
And I think I'm at a place now where those stories feel a little bit more risky and complicated, and women more specifically tend to be more fleshed out for the most part. Um, we still have a lot of work to be done. But yeah, the movement now is to more on camera work.
Is there a show right now that you would love to be on?
Oh my God, there's so many. I feel like the one now is Hacks.
Mhm.
I love that show. I think it's smart. It's quippy. Again, we're centering, two really strong women. It's funny. If I were to throw myself back into a couple years, like Shameless, but I guess, The Bear is like another world that feels really smart and purposeful. I just watched Shrinking, and there was something about that world that, like, is it really making me think intellectually? No, but like, are we understanding comedic timing? We are. I really enjoyed that. Um Man, there's also just like so much TV that it just becomes overwhelming
Yeah,
sometimes.
totally.
But those are some that right now are like swimming in the ether a little bit. Um, I mean, like a White Lotus would be epic, just something that is a little bit like grittier, but is not afraid to do something a little daring with style or communication, and is written with like full humans who are embodied. And ideally, there's like a little bit of comedy, or it's a little bit dark and messed up.
Amazing.
Yeah.
What does a day look like for you today? Like not necessarily today, but like give us a day in your life.
Yeah, a day in the life, that would be like, I'll create a curated ideal day in the life. I have a mix of me doing all the different multi-hyphenate parts of myself, right? So I identify as an actor primarily. I'm an acting coach, podcast host, and I'm also a writer. So in the spirit of a beautiful day that is totally what I want it to be, there is a mix of all of those. So I would potentially have clients, a lot of whom come to me specifically for monologues. I do this thing called monologue sourcing, where I find monologues specifically for you. So it's not by type, it's not by brand. I don't subscribe to any of that. Arguably, I'm really trying to like subvert that, because I don't think it's helpful messaging. It's like, who are you actually as a human being? And a monologue is a calling card for that. And so many people, A, don't have pieces that they like, and B, feel like they have pieces to fit something. And when you're going in with a monologue, it's like, we just want to know who you are and the kind of stories you like to tell usually, and then we're going to give you material from the piece anyway. So people come to me for this monologue sourcing thing that I've done for hundreds of actors, and I do a lot of that for BFA and MFA clients when they need these materials, or people who are revamping their books. So I'd say have a monologue client, a monologue sourcing client, and then I may have a student that I'm teaching specifically for, say, a BFA or an MFA audition circuit. So we're meeting at our weekly session to like work on their materials. And then I'll have another, maybe like a new client that's coming in and doing, an audition side that they're trying to put on tape with me. And then I will record an episode for the podcast, or I'll do some behind the scenes, prep, which I know you probably know a lot about, for getting that all orchestrated. And then I would try very hard, I'm not great at it, to be disciplined enough to do some more writing on some of the projects that I have currently in the pipeline. I have a pilot that I'm working on, a play that I'm working on, an animated movie that I'm working on. So there's those things that I maybe touch on. This is again like an ideal day.
Yeah.
And then, there's like a self-tape that came in, and I get to throw that on, and then I'll walk my dog for like an hour and listen to an audiobook or a podcast. And then I will probably sit on my couch and do a little bit of research, AKA watching TV for a little bit, and cook myself some really good food. Maybe scroll on TikTok for a hot second until I say, please stop. And then, shower, rinse, and repeat.
That sounds amazing. Is there a dream guest for your podcast?
Oh, there's a couple. They're like, I think the thing that I pride myself in is the fact that I really keep the space pretty curated for people who feel mission and valued aligned. I'm not just putting on people with like a lot of followers just because they can reach a lot of people. For me, it's about like, or somebody who's like trying to sell something and then they come on the entire time to market themselves. For me, it's really like, how can we engage in a conversation, like a true conversation where two people are meeting one another? And so there are a couple of like I guess like big named humans that I just want to talk to because I admire them. I mean, if we're throwing it into like the real ether of the universe, you know, Meryl Streep is like my all time. I just want to understand how you do what you do. And the craft of it. Kate Winslet too, like just I think two people who are very much like rooted in who they are and have navigated so many different versions of themselves in front of people, but done so in a way that wasn't in the public sphere. And I've admired that a lot. I've been listening to Barbara Streisand's massive, essentially like a dictionary worth of her memoir. And it's like 50 plus hours of an audiobook, and I'm almost finished. And I'm just fascinated by this woman after that. And I just also love so much of her career. And I see a lot of myself in the works that she's done, especially earlier in her life. So picking her brain a little bit would be really cool. These are some people that are just like popping up right now, but there's definitely some that I'm 1,000% missing.
Amazing. If I just love this question, if your 15-year-old self could see you now, what do you think she'd say?
It's funny that you asked that because I was thinking about that the other day. She probably would be like, what's happening? I think, you know, if there's anything that I've learned, it's that like life literally never goes according to plan. Like truly nothing in my life, not a single thing in my life is what I thought it would be. Not a single thing. Am I doing similar things that maybe I thought I'd be dabbling with? Maybe, but not a single thing is what I pictured.
Really? Not
Better
even
or for
on
worse.
tour?
No, I never wanted to tour. No, I had no interest in touring. I never thought I'd go to get my MFA. No, nothing is the way I thought it would be. And so in some ways there's a testament to, again, my adaptability or flexibility or curiosity to allow me to just like go with what felt was necessary or crucial at the time. And in some ways, you know, you're like, okay, but if I held on tighter, would that have? So yeah, I think my 15-year-old self would be like, what? like,
What did you
wow.
think it would be or look like?
I mean, there were so many more, I'd say, stereotypical versions of what we're taught we're supposed to want. And upon reflection, I don't know if that's actually what I wanted as much as I was told that that's what it should be. But back then it was, yeah, like the standard, like, you know, I'll be on Broadway by this amount of age, I'll be on TV by this time, I'll, you know, have this kind of family life and, you know, personal life by this time, and I'll live in this kind of home, and I'll have two of them over here and there. And like, you know, just again, this idealized version of what people told me the dream is for an actor that I then think I internalized and thought this is what I should do. And then thought I wanted because that's what I was told is the thing. And don't get me wrong, there's like some stuff that I've had to like mourn in essence, like, wow, that didn't happen the way I thought it would. But then with time and space and reflection, it's like, oh, but if that didn't happen this way, I wouldn't have found this. You know, it's like I don't want the pandemic to happen ever again, but I would be lying if I didn't say minus all the death and the sadness, I really enjoyed it a lot. I really enjoyed not feeling obligated to go to events I didn't want to, that I was able to like be more self-reflective. If I didn't have that time, I wouldn't have created the Empowered Artist Collective. I wouldn't. It wouldn't have come.
And have like Zoom like we have now.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't be meeting you. Like I wouldn't be able to have my coaching clients internationally around the country, the world, in the way that we're so adept at doing now. Like these things would never have happened had these things happened. And I could look back and be like, oh, I was just coming off of this Broadway tour. My momentum on my career was happening. I had, you know, just met with these amazing agents literally the Monday before the shutdown. Like all these things were happening for my career. And I could look back and be like, no. And there's certainly an element of that. And there's also these other beautiful things. So I think it's just a matter of like reframing my perspective on what 15-year-old Jennifer would have wanted. And perhaps that actually wouldn't have served me in the long run, or, you know, my dreams have morphed in like a different kind of purposeful way that are grounded in what I want and what I deserve and who frankly I want to be surrounding myself with. I think a lot of it is that, or the work that I want to be involved in, and is that fulfilling to me in a way that feels in alignment. And I think that's a very different perspective than young me, for sure.
No, I think anyone can relate to that in their own way. You know, that's just part of life.
Yeah.
Was going on tour fulfilling?
It was a real learning experience. I had just finished my MFA, moved back to New York, and at the time I had access to illegal breakdowns, which again, like, get me into the weeds around like the gatekeeping part of it. You know, I have feelings around the fact that we don't know what's going on and we don't have access to self-advocacy for that. And at the time I did. And I did a headshot resume drop off to Tara Rubin's office as they were casting for understudies and replacements for Broadway for the band's visit, being like, I'm so right for this for all these reasons. Please see me. And I got an appointment from that drop off.
Wow.
I went
Were you
through.
reps?
No. Mm-mm. All the work that I had, including Band's Visit Tour, including my first TV gig on New Amsterdam, a lot of my regional theater, and I was not repped. I was doing it all on my own. I was working all the time. Arguably, I worked more when I was hustling myself than when I've been repped, but that's a whole other conversation. And yeah, they called me in. I went through the audition process. My journey ended ironically with like the roller skating, because that is the role that I ended up booking on tour. But that is when my journey ended. And then a couple months later, I got another like, hey, we're still, you know, interested in understudies, replacements for Broadway, but also maybe tour. And I was like, and let us know if you aren't interested in tour. And I was like, well, I'm not booking this, so like, let me just do it. And then I did.
Wait, why did you feel that way?
The imposter syndrome part of it all, you know, it's like how would I, clearly you didn't like me enough when I roller skated this first time. Like, why would I book this now? Or, you know, who's to say I'm going to book an original, like the original touring company of a Broadway show that just won 10 Tony Awards. Like, that's wild. And I, you know, just got back from grad school to New York. It was only a couple months later, and the journey happened, and it happened. And it was kind of like a pivotal moment, because I really wanted to stay in New York at the time. I really wanted to stay in New York, even if that meant I wasn't working as much, so that I can focus more on TV and film. It's really what I wanted. And it was this big question of like, okay, and this musical essentially is a play. It happens to be the most play musical of them all. It's a story that really is beautiful and means a lot to you on a personal level. You are originating a role on a Broadway tour that was 10-time Tony Award winning. You will get health insurance. You will make more money. You will be stepping into this, you know, story. There are more benefits that outweigh the negatives. Even if this isn't exactly what you were wanting in this moment, trust that the universe is providing something for you, and there's a lesson in here.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it was a question. I had a lot of questions. It wasn't like, this is what I'm wanting to do. And I was so grateful for it, 1,000%. And realigning and re-questioning and, you know, really like seeing how that fit for me. And it ended up working. I learned a lot. It was the first show I'd ever done for that long. And the muscle of doing the same thing over and over and over again is very different than, you know, doing a 2 to 4 month regional contract of a show.
How long were you on the tour for?
We were on the tour for 10 months. It was supposed to be the year. Again, COVID shut it down.
Okay.
So it was 10 months by the time the shutdown happened. And, you know, that in of itself was a really big learning experience of like, this is something that I love. This is something that I cannot wait to act, and I cannot wait to be on a stage, and I cannot wait to, you know, share this story through me. And now I'm doing the same thing over and over and over again. And how do you engage with this material every day, remembering that there is at least one person out there whose life you could change, and it can inspire some kid who like wants to do this, and that is your responsibility at minimum. And how do me as a human being show up with all the life stuff happening, and your Airbnb wasn't ready by the time you moved into town, or your flight was delayed and now you were hustling, and like your bag was lost and whatever, or like who, you know, all the like life stuff while you're moving around, and there's the instability of it all. How can you show up to the art and the craft that you have the privilege of doing every night? And so that was a really big learning experience. traveling the country and seeing some really cool cities that I would never have otherwise gone to. That's really cool. And another beautiful blessing from it all was I really started to cultivate different relationships with universities and theater programs around the country as I was touring, where when I was in the city for X amount of time, I was teaching and doing master classes and workshops in person at these different universities while I was there. And I would never have been able to do that. And some of these relationships I still have to this day, that they still bring me out to these programs, or I do them virtually or whatever. And really fostering my teaching and my coaching while I was on tour. So again, like, didn't really want it in the way that I thought I did. And then ultimately these really wonderful things did come from it. And I just think that's a matter of like really allowing oneself to be adaptable and trust one's gut, and also like be open and curious to the possibilities of what something unexpected might bring.
Would you tour again?
No, unless I say that with a caveat. I was like, no. There are some shows, or more specifically, there's some roles. It's very, 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 it would have to be something very specific for me that means a lot and pays me well. I'd be lying if I didn't say that that was a part of it. And, or, you know, was something that operated under more of a structured equity contract that wasn't more of like very quick turnarounds. I think the thing that I really loved about our tour, specifically in the beginning, was we had longer sit downs, and those were really special because you actually felt like you can kind of integrate yourself into the space for a little bit. And so it's not what I'm looking to do. I guess in theory, I'm open to it, and it would really have to be for something very specific and, or, you know, beautifully aligned or creatively compelling. I have this rule that I do for myself. It's like a 3-prong. It has to, every job that I have has to meet 2 of the 3. One of them is career. So it could be, you know, like this creative team is like epic, super epic. And like career wise, it's a really important move for me to do that. The other one is financial. Is this financially meeting my goals? And the other one is artistic. Is this actually artistically fulfilling for me? Am I going to leave this, you know, rehearsal period, process, show, whatever, feeling like I'm fulfilled in some way, or I've learned something or grown? And if it doesn't meet 2 of them, I'm, for the most part, I don't do it. So it's possible that like there's a workshop that pays literal pennies or nothing, but the creative team is dope and this role is unbelievable, I'll do it. Yeah. Or if there's something that pays me nothing and, you know, is so artistically fulfilling, sorry, pays me nothing, so artistically fulfilling. No, that's the one I just did. Or there's like, yeah, pays me everything, right. Artistically fulfilling, but like, oh my God, this creative team, I'll consider, you know, like just really trying to keep those things in mind has been really helpful for me. It's not foolproof. Sometimes I ignore myself and sometimes I override that rule, but at least to kind of gauge like, where does this fit and how am I feeling about it for all of these buckets of myself?
What's the dream now?
TV, for sure. I love the idea of having an arc. I love the idea of having work that is spread out over more time. Yeah. And ideally something that continues, you know, for a while, and then you have more quote unquote stable work for more time. You know, I think a lot of the trending situation currently with streaming and post-strike and, you know, less standard quote unquote pilot seasons and just the reframing of network television and just a lot of the shifting that's happening on the TV front of things. I do feel like a lot of it comes down to self-creation. And so not taking away the idea that it might have to stem from me and the things that I'm wanting to see happen and be created. And so trying to step a little bit more into actualizing these ideas that live in my brain and seeing what can happen for those to make the on-camera work happen, but definitely more TV.
What are you proudest of?
Within my career?
In your life?
My dog. My dog Walter is literally my heart and everything, and I'm the proudest to be his dog mom. Oh. I mean, like truly, like, I don't know if that makes me like pathetically sad.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah, he's the best thing that ever happened to me. It's like one of those things too, where it's like I was fostering dogs before going on tour. I told myself that when I got off of tour, I was going to adopt. And then it was like this nebulous thing in the COVID shutdown of like we were going back to tour, we weren't going back to tour. And then finally, I was fostering in that nebulous time. And then when they were like, we're not going back for a while if we go back. And it was like, well, I guess I'm gonna take the plunge. And this little dude came into my life, and I don't know how anybody did the pandemic without any animal support. Like I really don't in any capacity, but B, like the purposefulness, especially on the hard days, and especially when things are frustrating, and especially when things aren't working out the way that you want them to know that every day I wake up, and if not for me, I go outside and like take care of this living, breathing human being that relies on me. Like, and then when I'm having a bad day, I get to hold him like a real living, breathing stuffed animal, like wild, like that for, and then you look at him and you're like, you're an actual animal. Like you're totally domesticated, but you're an animal who lives in my home and has better health insurance than I ever will. Like bizarre.
So funny.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
What would you say has been the biggest obstacle you've overcome in your life?
It's a big question.
Yeah.
The biggest obstacle, there's definitely a couple. And I don't know if I fully overcome it, but it kind of goes back to a little bit what we were talking about earlier of I'm continuing to try to overcome this one. I think all of us have things that we were told, taught, ingrained in us that live very deep in our psyche that many of us spend many years and probably lots of money trying to unpack
Totally.
and overcome. And I think for me, the biggest one has been the narrative since I could remember that I was always too big, to stop taking up so much space, to stay smaller, stop talking, stop having an opinion, stop being so loud, stop needing to be seen. And when you're a kid, it's not even something that you're aware of. You're just simply expressing yourself. But then you're told that it's too much somehow, and you have to like recalibrate your instincts and recalibrate who you are and how you exist in relationship to other people, but also within yourself. And arguably that's been the biggest thing that I continuously navigate in my career. There have been times that I have really kept myself small, so that I didn't, upset the peace, or that I didn't overstep, or that I stayed in my lane. And then there have been other times where I've really let myself trust in myself and trust that the people who respond to who I am as a human being will find me, and those rooms will find me, and it will feel organic and fulfilling for everyone when I am fully stepping into who I am, and they're also doing the same. Again, this isn't like, none of this is to say like with other people not doing the same.
Totally.
I pray and hope that they all do. But I think a lot of the things that I've been taught and told were that like by me doing that, I'm somehow taking away from other people and it's somehow selfish. And I don't believe that that is the way things are. I really do believe that like you showing up fully allows me to do so, and me doing so allows you. And then we're finally like two beautifully different, gorgeous human beings taking up space. Like that's the world I dream of being in, where everyone's able to fully express themselves respectfully and kindly, of course, but really like being who they are and breathing into that. And I haven't fully overcome it. I actually think it's going to be like the thing that will be my biggest life journey. But I've taken a lot of steps towards proudly owning all that I am, and recognizing that there's a lot of beauty in how I show up and the way that I offer space and cultivate community and listen to other people, and have created opportunities for other people to do so for themselves. And I'm really trying and continue to try and will continue to try to continue stepping more into who I am, and not apologizing for that, and not trying to keep myself small for other people's comfort. Their discomfort has nothing to do with me. It has to do with their own stuff. And I don't need to be prioritizing their needs over mine. I can be doing both and recognizing and having dialogue around it. We can hopefully all show up in a way that we all feel comfortable and seen. But certainly that journey of really trying to unabashedly, again, with care, comfort, and empathy, show up.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
What do you want your legacy to be?
Ooh, the heavy hitters.
I know.
Heavy hitters.
Ready for this.
Like light chatting, Julia. Just make it happen.
I can't help it.
I love it. My legacy. It's when I was in 8th grade, I went to a modern Orthodox Jewish day school my whole life. It explains probably a lot of things to a lot of people and not a lot to other people. And in my 8th grade, I was in a honors Talmud class. It was me and 3 other people from my class, and then some other kids. I was in it in 7th and 8th, and at 7th grade, there were 8th graders, and 8th grade, there were some 7th graders, but it was like a small little honors class. And the teacher made us, this is so wild, he made us write obituaries for ourselves in 8th grade. Again, there's a lot to unpack here. Clearly that memory has stuck with me, and I wish I found or had that piece of paper of like what I wrote. But when anybody asks me like, what do I want my legacy to be? I think about the 8th grade version of myself who like had to reflect on her like 8th grade life and be like, what do I want to leave behind?
Yeah.
I think now, and this is like a messy in draft version, I want people to remember how I made them feel.
Mm-hmm.
I think that at the core of it is my legacy. I want it to be like, oh, she made me feel insert X, whether that's like empowered or understood or seen or heard or supported or giddy or loved, or I want that to be the thing. Obviously there's like the checklist of I hope that I can, get to these parts and these career milestones for myself of what I dream of in the structure of the industry and the systems that are there. But again, as I've learned, like nothing that I ever planned has ever gone to plan. And I think if there's any lesson there for me, it's that like continue trusting the fact that nothing's gone to plan, and therefore your life will always be unplanned in some way. And so just trust the fact that it'll be very unconventional, and that's okay. So the checklist is harder. Like, do I have things that are like, oh my God, this body of work that she created was epic. Would love that. Like, oh my God, the roster of people that she has coached, or the roster of people that got into these incredible, programs that then went on to do these unbelievable things, or, that to be really impactful. And like, Empowered Artists Collective, whatever that ends up morphing into, or like however many seasons we do of this podcast, like, oh my God, this resource that she created that now lives on for generations to come, or has connected all these people together. And now there's a community that are all like-minded. Like, sure, the conceptual stuff about my career, or she wrote these epic things and look what they were made into these things. And now look at them lasting forever. That would be great. But it'd be really great. But ultimately it's really like she made me feel like this, and no one made me feel like that. She had an uncanny ability to do this. I really admired the way that she was tenacious, and the way that she was purposeful, and the way that she was, communicative, and the way that she was unafraid to speak her mind and show up for herself and her communities and the people that she loved, that she was, a loyal, diehard friend and coworker, that she really, really wanted the world to be a better place, and that she really was trying in her own little sphere and bubble in the world to really try and make an impact and question why things were the way that they were and how can she change it otherwise. I think there's definitely more of like the existential legacy rather than like the tactile, like these things.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Wow. Thank you for just sharing your thoughts and your time. It's really such an honor to get to learn more about your story, and you're really, really incredible. I really admire everything that you do to give back and to make space for others.
Thank you. I'm so grateful to be in this space. I think it's awesome that you're creating this space and asking such deep, purposeful questions. I've I've had the privilege of being on, a couple different podcasts, and certainly like I have my own, and I resonate with ones that really try to like see the person in front of them
Mm.
and really try to hold space for the person that's sitting there, and you do that. And so you're really doing wonderful work, and I'm so privileged and honored to be in this space with you, and thank you for asking real questions, that feel deep and not just for the sake of questions.
That really means the world to me because that is 1000% the intention and the goal. So the fact that that's recognized and felt feels really good. So thank you for saying that.
Of course, I mean it. I mean it. I don't say what I don't mean if you haven't gotten that drift. I think the world can feel really overwhelming. The world is really overwhelming. And this industry can also feel the same. And so to be living in a time where there's a lot of overwhelm and there's a lot of stimuli and then there's a lot of noise.
Yeah.
The best advice I could give anyone, and I certainly give this when I like teach and somebody's like, what do you do to like keep your, like blah, 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 like, and it's just is to really find things that are outside of the noise that make you come back to yourself. For me, that's hiking and, mountains and skiing and climb anything on a mountain, and spending time with my dog or being out in nature. For me, that's where I feel most myself, and I can hear myself and I can hear the universe the way it's supposed to be because there's silence. It's not for everyone. Some people it's, like retail therapy, and some people it's like, a long drive and listening to music, and others it's a long bubble bath with a lot of candles and whatever it is. But really finding the spaces and the people and the communities that fill you, that have nothing to do with all of the noise. I really do believe that that is the only way to sustain a career in this industry. And ultimately, if you are the vessel through which you are storytelling, for you not to know yourself as well as you possibly could, or to spend time with yourself and get to learn, like, be disappointed in, frustrated by all parts of yourself, and navigate what that means to grow and become fuller, to like really listen to your gut and your impulses and the things that in a deep knowing, to really cultivate that as like a skill set, I would argue is more important than all of the classes that you would take to better your craft. And so if that means taking a step back to come back to yourself and love yourself a bit more, or really carving out very intentional time for you to come to yourself and love yourself more, I would really just like offer that. That's all you have, really. And as things feel pressured and overwhelming and really noisy, like, you are the thing that has to exist in all of that. And if you aren't with yourself in all of the beautiful, gorgeous ways, and know how you need to be held and within yourself, forget anybody else. Like, if you don't know that about yourself, you're doing yourself a disservice, because like, you are the thing. Like, that is, you are,
because then you can't show up for.
Exactly. And so I think that would be the only other piece, is like, find time to learn about yourself, and ideally love all of it, messy and otherwise, and things that you wish were different, and will hopefully one day if you want that. But like, there's time and space to do it. There's always time and space to work on yourself, or to be with yourself, or to just like hold space for yourself. And we don't do it enough because the universe yells at us to not, but you deserve that.
That is so important and powerful and beautifully said. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.